This episode is a deeply personal conversation about what happens when women's pain is dismissed, minimized, or simply not believed. We're talking about the very real cost of being misdiagnosed, overlooked, or sent home without answers, and the systemic bias in healthcare that allows it to keep happening. My guest today is Anusha Gandhi, an endometriosis and chronic illness advocate, a health navigator, and the founder of Femade, an Ottawa-based women's health center focused on chronic pain and reproductive care. Anusha brings both professional expertise and lived experience to this conversation, and I relate to that more than I wish I did. The reality is this isn't rare. Too many women are still navigating a system where they're seen as unreliable narrators of their own bodies, where symptoms are labeled as stress, anxiety, or just in your head. In this episode, we dig into where that comes from, the long history of medical bias against women, and how this still impacts the safety and effectiveness of treatments today. And importantly, we get into what needs to change and the level of research, medical training, and policy, and how women can advocate for themselves in medical settings without feeling that they have to prove their pain. Let's get into it. I'm Camille, and this is Kind of Bold. Anusha, you have experienced what it's like to live a life shaped by chronic illness, specifically endometriosis, and you've been very open about your story and the fact that your symptoms weren't taken seriously for many years. I also have two chronic conditions, and I know what it feels like to get my symptoms dismissed, and this is something that way too many women experience still to this day. And I'm sure you've heard this idea that women are considered overly emotional, and there's this long history of labeling women hysterical, with hysteria literally meaning womb in Greek. Why do you think these biases still exist to this day?
You know what? It's mind-boggling to me. I mean, the whole concept of it has led me to do a tremendous amount of research. Like, I have read every book out there about women's health and sort of the beginnings of when we started to address different menstrual health issues and pain and whatnot. And it still shocks me that we're experiencing this today. And I don't think it's because women aren't speaking up. I think, there's a theory that women just push on, and that by the time they go see a doctor, it is so far progressed that the level of pain that they're experiencing or the level of symptoms that they're experiencing is like gone from 0 to 100. And so maybe that plays into doctors saying, well, you didn't come to me when you first started getting little signs of this, or you've never expressed this before, or it's very rare that we see these types of challenges, things like that. But then you look at the involvement of women in clinical trials and how that involvement only started in 1993, and how very recently there was a bill passed here in Canada that every doctor needs to start considering women's health. Like
Wow.
it's just mind-boggling to me. Considering, right? Doesn't mean that they have to do anything or change anything, but they have to just consider that when a female walks into their office, they need to be a little bit more aware of how women express heart attacks differently, or how they might react to different medications differently. I wish I had an answer as to why 50% of the population is still not being treated adequately, and that when we do seek care, we're dramatic, we're maybe going through anxiety, maybe too tired.
Why do you think women wait? You talked about how we wait until symptoms are pretty advanced and pretty painful.
Yeah.
Why do we not speak up before that? What's getting in the way? Or is it fear? Is it fear of not being heard, or the fact that women tend to power through a whole lot?
I think it's a lot of factors. And when I look at my own mother, for instance, and everything she has to do in a day, right? So she plays more of sort of the matriarchal role, where she has a full-time job, but she's also the caretaker in the family. She's also the one making dinner. She's also the one cleaning and doing the laundry. And the idea of pausing all of that to get medical attention. What if they want me to go on drugs? What if I have to go to the hospital? There's this fear of having to step away from all of the requirements that she has to do in her day-to-day life, that going to the doctor is not slotted in. I think I'm seeing the millennial generation doing a better job. We're starting to learn to prioritize ourselves a little bit more. Even those who have kids, even those who have jobs, even those who are juggling a lot, they're carving out that time to go seek medical care, because I think there's a lot more fear around health these days too, right? But even still, I think there's this real fear of, or hesitation of, but what if? What if there is something wrong? What if I need to change something? What if? And perhaps men don't have the same fears. I think men are maybe more black and white. Okay, something's wrong. I need to fix it. Okay, I'm feeling this way. I don't want to feel this way. I could go on. The amount of times I've seen men in the emergency department and how quickly they get care and how compassionate the doctors are towards issues that they're dealing with. Women don't get that. They don't receive that. So why would you go to the doctor?
It's very interesting what you said about carving out time for that doctor's visit, and also the what if there's something really wrong with me and I need to carve out more time out of the family schedule in order to take care of myself. And taking care of oneself as a woman, as a mother, as a partner typically falls down the bottom of the list. I thought honestly, this is so validating, because I thought it was just me, because I have terrible health anxiety, and whenever something comes up with me, I'm not very quick in responding to that signal from my body. And I thought it might have been because I'm scared. I'm scared of what it might be, but I'm wondering if there's this legacy in just not taking that moment for ourselves, and just like men do, just act on it right away.
There's probably twofold issues, right? There's this legacy of, we were raised as individuals that need to push through, right? There
Yeah.
really wasn't this incentive from our parents or our grandparents to go seek medical attention if something was wrong. You just kind of did what you needed to do to get through. But then, and each person is individual, obviously, so we all carry our own unique histories. But imagine at a certain point you do go seek medical care and you're forced to explain, you're forced to substantiate what you're feeling. That could be at a young age, that could be in your teens, that could be older in life. That stays with you, right? And so if you know that it is hard to convince a doctor that you're feeling a certain way, would you want to do that again? Probably not, right?
I can totally relate to that. Whenever I go and see a doctor, I always prepare my pitch
Yes.
as if I need to convince them, I need to advocate for myself, I need to demonstrate the problem is real and that it deserves attention. And I don't know if I'm doing this because I just tend to be this way. I just tend to make lists, or if it's because there's a pattern there about being a woman, just like you said, having to explain and over explain what's going on with them in the hopes that we will get the care that we deserve.
That's right. That's right. And I know these are really broad strokes, right? I mean, certainly I'm hoping that there are women out there who have never had to fight as hard for care. And perhaps there are men out there who have had to advocate for themselves. So, these are really big generalities, but as a whole, I think the evidence speaks for itself. I mean, the amount of women who are fighting to even be considered in the healthcare system, the amount of women that I work with on a daily basis who need a script before they go into a doctor's office, or they need to figure out how to manage their anxieties around doctor's appointments and medications and surgeries and everything else. That doesn't come from nowhere. That comes from a basis. That comes from some sort of an experience, whether you're cognizant of it or not. you've had to behave a certain way in the doctor's office, and that has shaped how you see the medical system. And doctors are humans as well. So they might not be aware of some of the newer drugs that are there. If patients know about it and sort of ask in an appropriate way, you can enlighten that physician and they can look into it and maybe see if that's a great fit for you. So it's about being your own advocate. It's about knowing what your options are and then doing everything in your power to navigate that system and have a very truthful and empowering conversation with your physician so that you can navigate yourself through that medical system.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if it's also the fear of being dismissed and our symptoms being dismissed as stress, anxiety, or being told that it's all in our head. I actually experienced this firsthand when I was 17. I suddenly lost about half of my hearing in both ears and started having tinnitus, which is ringing in the ear. And at the same time, I developed chronic hives. Many doctors attributed it to the fact that my sister had passed away a few months prior, and maybe that was the case. But over 20 years, I worked on myself and did countless therapies trying to understand what was going on. And I only recently found out that my hearing loss is hereditary and my chronic hives are autoimmune. This was never mentioned to me as being a possibility. It was like, oh, you must have been under tremendous stress, which of course I was with the passing of my sister, and that's what caused your symptoms. It's almost like it stops there. Here's your answer. Right? Here's your answer. Now go and live with it.
Oh gosh, there's so many things I want to say about this. Once you have an answer, you kind of move forward. But if you don't have that answer and you're constantly working at trying to figure out, why do I have this and why do I have this, right? Doctors know what they have been taught. And if what you are presenting is so far beyond anything that they have seen in their career, you may get a unicorn doctor who thinks, I want to solve this. I want to figure out why this patient has these two seemingly unrelated issues. Let's connect them. Let's see if they're related. Let's see if maybe they're the beginnings of something that could manifest into a more evident disease. But that is, gosh, like I don't even know what percentage of doctors would even bother doing that. And so, well, you're familiar with the Canadian medical system. Within a 15-minute appointment, if they can't figure out what is wrong with you, that's on you, right?
Yes,
that's on you. And so if you can muster up the strength to continue to push and continue to do your own research and continue to get in front of that doctor and challenge that doctor and insist that something is wrong, you're just going to fall through the cracks.
And do you think this happens to men as well? Or do women get more mysterious illnesses that doctors don't know about? Or does this have to do with the fact that not as much research has been done on female bodies?
I think that there is a fundamental misunderstanding of the female body. And going back to a statement I had made earlier, which is that women were required to be part of clinical trials since 1993. But if there is a medication that is being trialed and they don't want to get into the weeds of how this medication might be altered based on a woman's cycle, they can omit that. And so that means that as we progress in medicine, we're becoming even further disconnected with a woman's hormonal system and all of the interactions of that hormonal system. Men are just very simple beasts. So we know how they will react to medications. We know what all the side effects might be. We know that a disease is fairly straightforward because it's not being confounded by other factors such as hormones, right? I mean, hormones play such a big role for females, and not only their mere existence, but if you have a disease like endometriosis or polycystic ovarian syndrome, we don't even know enough about those diseases, let alone how they would differ from a body that has a very typical menstrual cycle with no sort of outliers, right? So I just think we as women confuse the medical system so much that we don't get the answers that we need. And men are quite simple, structured beings. They go in with
Is it that
things.
they're quite simple, or is it just that they have been the baseline for all research done for so many years that we know a lot about them?
I think both. I think both.
Both?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think both. And I've gone to the doctor with my grandfathers and my father and my own husband, and it's very straightforward. They go in with a prostate issue, and enough research has been done on the
Yeah.
prostate that they know how to test it, they know how to treat it, they know what the side effects are. It's very laid out. It's a very different journey. So I think you're right. I think it's not just that they're simple, but that we've done massive exploration on every iteration of disease, medications, clinical trials, the whole gamut. There are no real surprises.
It's very interesting what you said about hormones and the fact that women were excluded from most clinical trials until the 1990s, because even today, data often isn't sex disaggregated, which means that the difference between male and female response is not recorded. So even if women are included in the clinical trial, we cannot see how differently men and women respond to the drug and based on their hormones. And perhaps also the data is so recent that we're going to need many more years to analyze it before we can come up with custom solutions for women.
sure. For sure. Actually, I don't even know that in those clinical trials they segregate age or time of cycle or any of these like further characterizations to understand how one group of women might be affected on that drug versus another group, right? I think it's really blanketed. It's control groups versus affected individuals.
And it's a bit of a catch-22 because women weren't included in clinical trials for so long, most of the drugs that are on the market today were not fully or at all tested on women. And so the side effects that you read about, they're not for you.
No.
I mean, there might be,
Right.
but you might experience completely different
Oh,
ones.
yeah.
And when you do, as women, typically it's like, what's wrong with me? And this shouldn't be doing this to me. Or if we go back to the doctor saying this isn't working for me, then what is the answer
Oh my
then?
gosh, yes. Yes, this rings true for the type of medication I'm on for my ulcerative colitis. So I'm on a biologic and it's an immunosuppressant. There's a laundry list of side effects that come with each of these medications. And I went on a Facebook group for individuals that were on the same medication as I started out. And it was eye-opening that a lot of these drugs give you sort of these body achiness, joint pain, muscle pain, fatigue, malaise, these types of things. But you can tell that it's never been tested on individuals who are on their period. Because the number of people who say that their symptoms are exacerbated during that 1 week when they're bleeding, I mean, you've got to think that there is a way to combat that or some sort of treatment that they can bolster what's happening in your body so that you don't have to fall in such a low for 7 days. 7 days, that's a quarter of someone's
7
life,
days.
right?
It's a long,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I think you've hit the nail on the head in that by and large, what I'm seeing is that the people who are really struggling are the ones who already have hormonal issues, reproductive issues, things like that, that have such an impact on your body. And that's where I see there's a real opportunity for pharmaceutical companies to compete in that way. If someone came up with a way to help women struggle less during that part of their cycle, that could be huge.
Whenever we picture somebody having a heart attack, we think of a middle-aged white man, grabbing his chest and going, oh, And apparently, symptoms of heart attacks in women can look very, very different. And not having them in mind, not having ever seen them, can lead to real consequences. Women dying, but also not being believed in areas like heart disease, chronic pain, and autoimmune conditions, because things don't show up in the same way as they do in men.
Yeah. That's an interesting one because there is a dramatic difference between how heart attacks are presented in men and women. And there were publications done where they interviewed men and women who have had heart attacks but had to wait in emerge. And because women presented with these different signs and the medical teams did not think it was a heart attack, women underwent full-on heart attack in the emergency department without getting the attention that they needed. So that sort of pivotal moment in medicine, I think, really challenges what we know and what we don't. And if you meet a doctor who's been practicing for, 30, 40 years, they may not today even know that we've updated the treatment methodology, right? So that's how new this is. But to then be able to say, okay, let's use the knowledge that we have and explore if there are other areas in medicine that we've anecdotally heard women not getting the treatment that they required. Let's go back in time and try to figure out if we can do better. Unfortunately, I don't think that's how it works, right? I don't think anyone's proactive unless they have funding to dedicate time and expertise on that and to really unpack where we've failed. But as you said, I think we as women have not been taught what to look out for. Similar, but not, is a commercial that they had for this drug called Oralisa. Oralisa is a hormone blocker that is used to treat those with endometriosis. And there is a very famous dancer that is the spokesperson for this drug. And on the commercials, she is able to dance freely. She is able to live her life.
Of course.
She is able to just be normal. And I was visibly angry when I first saw this commercial because I was on this drug. I know tons of people who have been on this drug and a very similar drug called Lupron. That is not what your life looks like when you are on those medications.
It's so misleading. Yeah.
Right? So I think we do a very horrible job all around in presenting reality to individuals so that they have some actual sense of what to expect when they're either sensing that they have a disease or when they're on a treatment or what life is going to look like. Media paints a very pretty picture. And then when you start the drug and your life does not mirror what you've seen on TV, the last thing you want to do is go to your doctor and say, this is what I'm experiencing, for fear of them saying, well, that's not common. It must not be because of the drug.
It must be you.
It must be you. It's awful.
It's awful. Yeah. And to a very different degree, commercials for tampons as well. Mm-hmm. There's actually a very funny stand-up, funny but not funny stand-up. I forget the name of the comedian. She's fantastic, where she says, oh, you can wear a tampon, you go ride a horse or go do this. And she's like, I don't even want to do this when I'm not on my period. But you're right. It paints a completely unrealistic picture of what it's like to be in these bodies.
It's horrible. And, even more detrimental to our well-being, I think, is social media. And that's a whole other ballgame, right? Because, again, in Canada, it's different. We don't get paid for making TikTok videos and there's no revenue source associated with it. But in places like the US, they can make quite a lot of money off of their posts. And so it's this mathematics of how do I get more followers so I can get paid? And oftentimes it's about painting a really fun and beautiful portrayal of your life. And you almost want that followership to have envy and want to be like you. And so it's very rare that you see someone get raw with their life, raw with their emotions, raw with their symptoms. Somebody wants to see that, right? And so no one's really going on social media and talking about the ugly and the dirty because, then people don't really want to envy you or follow your advice, or it's a catch-22.
Yeah, if it's not working for
Yeah.
you, why would I?
Why would I follow you?
I want to talk about pain for a second. That nearly all pain studies have been done exclusively on male mice, and that women have different immune systems. And of course, as we talked about hormones, we're generally smaller and have thinner skin and higher percentage of body fat. And therefore, we respond to pain differently, and our sensitivity to pain depends on where we are in our menstrual cycle.
Yes.
And yet, it feels like we have to prove that we're in pain.
I mean, again, hormones, right? I even know that when I shave my legs during certain parts of my cycle, I'm more prone to cutting my skin. Like, yeah, sometimes it.
I think I don't shave regularly enough anymore to know that.
Yeah, but I don't think there is a level of compassion towards this difference in pain, right? It would be one thing to get, for lack of a better word, sympathy from the medical system that women experience pain differently. It would be even better for many if they receive the sympathy from their employers. There are a lot of countries who are fighting for menstrual leave, but you would have to go to your boss and say, I'm on my period, I'm in pain, I need to stay home. And what we've found, because I've been on committees where we've been fighting for this here in Canada, and the pushback is that individuals don't necessarily want to have that conversation with HR or with their boss, right? They don't want to admit that they're on their period, or that, it's so bad that they need to take time off. And so what mechanism can we use where people can just get what they need, get the attention they need, get the time off that they need, without, again, having to produce evidence or justify it?
It would need to begin with, being comfortable uttering the word period in a public space, as opposed to saying on flow, or it's that time of the month,
Right.
or
Right.
Can we say plainly to our employer, I'm on my period,
Yeah.
I'm feeling unwell,
Right.
I need to take a day off?
Yeah.
Yeah, can we normalize that?
Can we normalize it? And it pains me to think that not enough companies provide health benefits equally, right? Because of my own experiences. I envision someone working at an office desk who could have a heating pad, pop some Advil, maybe close their eyes for a minute. But then I'm always kind of shooken into reality that people are working machinery and driving trucks and doing an array of jobs where.
That's true.
Right? And
we think of office jobs.
We think of office jobs. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I can't say to someone, pop some pain meds, when that could really put them at risk if they're operating heavy machinery. And if you're in a male-dominated work environment, you're definitely not telling your boss that you're on your period and need time off, right? So there are challenges beyond what I'm even privy to. There is this sort of mind over matter capability that we can have from time to time. And I'm really cautious about the stigma around it's all in your head. But the reality is pain is experienced very, very differently. So pain is one category, but we also know that women are prone to autoimmune diseases much more than men are, right? And so there's that hyper awareness of some of these symptoms that women might be experiencing. Women themselves are becoming a lot more alert and ready to go down the path of, this could be Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, this could be chronic fatigue syndrome, this could be multiple sclerosis, all of these things that are exacerbated in women. We're ready for it. our knowledge is much more accelerated than the medical system. If this is affecting your life, you do unfortunately need to be the champion of that and advocate as much as you possibly can.
I wonder if the fact that women experience pain differently and that it is not acknowledged by society, and it kind of perpetuates that stereotype that women are weaker, less resilient, complain more, and so in order not to dwell in that and perpetuate that stereotype, we shut it down. We don't talk about it, or we minimize the way we're feeling because we don't want people to think that.
I can speak from personal experience, but I can also speak from, working with hundreds, if not thousands of other women, is that we learn to have pain and live with pain. Certainly if you've got a chronic pain disease, be it that you've been dismissed or not, your pain will continue to exist and you will continue to find ways to work around it. And so we become these warriors where our pain level is so tremendous that if someone were to get that today, they'd be bedridden. But we numb it. We ignore it. We numb it. We get used to it. My husband always jokes because he'll say, "What's your pain level today?" And I'll say, "Oh, it's probably about a 4." And he's like, "Okay, so it's really a 7, right?" That's just how it goes. Is we react to
our baseline
changes. Our baseline changes, and that's why so many of us in the chronic illness space really try to teach people to not do the mistakes that we did, which is ignoring it, because it's just going to get worse. It's just going to become normal. And that long-term pain and inflammation can cause so much harm in your body. So much. And so there's got to be a balance between pushing through and then realizing, okay, this really isn't normal. I should not be living with this. I do need to go seek help.
Sometimes it's exhausting though, and it's not like we're giving up.
Yeah, I know.
But wanting to forget about it for a minute, that this is normal, pretend that we're normal. And because getting out there and keep advocating for yourself and keep telling your story, all of that is just exhausting.
Yeah, it's exhausting. And that's the other piece to it, is the amount of times that I have crashed out after being dismissed by a doctor or being sent home from a merge because they couldn't find anything, or the medical system just kind of threw their hands up and say, "We're at the end of our road. We don't know what to do." You crash out and you lose hope. And you're allowed to, right? We're all human.
Yeah.
We're allowed to just say, "No, I'm done." But then you got to give yourself some grace and then pick it back up again. And that's hard, right? And if you've got people around you who are your biggest champions, you'll hear them say, "No, you got to try again. You got to do this. You got to do that. What about this? I've done some research." Like, you could be bombarded from the other side by people who just want to see you succeed. But you do have to allow yourself some grace and pause and not fight. Just kind of melt for a little bit because you want to come back stronger.
So what do you think needs to change at the system level?
I think about this a lot. Namely because when I work with my patients, I reflect on the tools that I'm giving them, but it only goes so far. Because if they run up against a doctor who doesn't know about endometriosis or refuses to give them their treatment options or refuses to refer them to a specialist or refuses to acknowledge, right? That's a huge word. Acknowledge that they're going through this. Then everything I've done makes no sense. And depending on where you live and what your medical system is like, you may not have the ability or opportunity to go seek another doctor, right? That might not be available to you. If I could work with the accreditation firms and the medical schools and these institutions that require physicians to keep on top of modern medicine, it would be that they become much more aware of the struggles of women, the requirements and the needs of each of these populations to get a diagnosis. Gatekeeping is not the answer, and we need to ensure that doctors have the information, that they are made aware that things are changing, guidelines are changing, diagnoses are changing, symptoms and side effects are changing. If they're not aware, that's where this all falls.
Yeah. Like you said, it would have to be taught in medical schools. It would have to be included in curriculums.
Yes.
There would need to be training and professional development opportunities for doctors. And I don't know if that's happening yet and
Well,
how long it
I don't
take.
think it's happening. I would be elated to find out that medical school is including more on these issues. I think what is actually happening is awareness and education on menopause. There seems to be a big splash around menopause,
Yeah, I can see
right?
that at the moment. Yeah.
And so that may be the door that opens for us. And not only could it incentivize doctors to learn more about women's health, but it could actually create a buzz around women's health where physicians actually want to specialize in minimally invasive gynecological surgeries or in cardiology to support Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or, all of these areas and pockets that are underserved. Maybe this is where physicians get excited and say, oh my gosh, there's so much opportunity here. I want to get involved, right? You need those hungry doctors to say, that's what I want to do. I want to make a difference. I want to move to a place where I can really change things. So maybe menopause is the ticket to all of
Yeah,
this.
and I had a conversation with my doctor recently. Is a newly assigned doctor. He seems really great, and I was telling him about some of my what I believe are some perimenopause symptoms. And despite his best intentions, his first two questions were, do you still have regular periods? Yes. And do you have hot flashes? No. So based on that, I don't have perimenopause symptoms, but then I had to, with my little pitch list, tell him what other symptoms can show up and insomnia and weight loss struggle, that. And so thankfully he was quite receptive to that and agreed to investigate further. But I think he's a unicorn, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
Even though I could tell that he was not fully educated on the matter. He was willing to try and see what was out there to help me. But most women who have similar conversations with their physicians will be told to go home and no, you're not in perimenopause, you're fine. Good luck. Yeah.
So I think, or rather I hope, that those same doctors will be forced to learn more about it, right? If and
it would be mandatory.
It would be
for
mandatory.
Them to...
And it's all over LinkedIn, and all these other doctors are getting involved, and they're being supported by naturopathic doctors, and they're learning different ways to treat patients. And so maybe it's this atmosphere that we create where more doctors are learning, but it's the ones who are left behind are really outdated and they're forced to learn it, right? And if we can follow that path and continue into other pockets of women's health, maybe we'll see a change. Maybe. I want to see that in my lifetime, to be honest with you, because I think when something does trend, it trends quickly. I never thought I would live in a world where we would openly talk about periods and openly talk about pain and openly talk about these things. And the generation after you and I have no problem talking about these terms. Everyone talks about the way that they're feeling and what their symptoms are and what kind of menstrual products they use and if they're on birth control and all these things. And while it's still quite, weird to hear people talk so openly about it, I think it's a massive change in the right
I
direction,
agree.
right?
Yeah. And I do this with my 8-year-old son. He
Wow.
knows all about periods, and he knows when I'm not feeling 100% and why and what that means. So I think it's important also to educate little boys if they one day choose to be with a woman that they can be not only understanding but advocates too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And so imagine you're a doctor and your patient comes in and is so open and intelligent about what they're feeling. You're kind of the dumb one in that situation if you don't know how to look out for the signs or the treatments or whatever. Like maybe that's where we'll see change as well, is these doctors feeling like they're left out and they're behind.
And so until we get there, hopefully in our
Yeah.
lifetime, how can women advocate for themselves in medical settings without feeling like they have to prove their pain? So this is the core of your job, essentially. What kind of script, if any, do you give women, and what would you tell listeners for them to walk away with as they continue to advocate for their own health?
I would say find a strength within you where you love yourself and you believe in yourself. And oftentimes, when you're with a doctor and you're being challenged, it's easier to communicate with those doctors when you have confidence in yourself, in what you're feeling, in what you're experiencing. When you self-doubt or when you get nervous, that's when the doctors start to doubt what you're experiencing and they find an in to plant that gaslighting in, right? The words I'm saying sound easy. They're not. It takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of confidence. And if you can't find that within yourself, then find someone who believes in you and take that person with you on your appointments.
Oh, okay.
That makes a
Good idea.
difference because I've had my husband at times, I've had my mother at times come with me to the doctor's appointments. And as a doctor is trying to push me down, that person next to me will say, no. I've seen her on her day to day. I've seen what she can tolerate. I've seen what she's gone through. There is no way that what you're saying is accurate. I need you to reassess this.
I love that.
Because it can be
Yeah.
hard and it's
Bring your
exhausting.
champion.
Bring your champion. Make notes before you go into the doctor's office. And whether it's me or it's someone else that you find in the world that has gone through similar experiences, I know in your head you're thinking, well, why do I have to do this research? Why doesn't the doctors do this for me? But in the state of the world right now, you do need to be a little bit more educated on what this disease entails or what you think it is or what your experiences might be telling you. Do that research, come with questions. And the more you know about what options are available to you, the more you can be powerful in those conversations. It's a challenge, right? It's a challenge and it's a formula. And I've even learned how to change the tone of my voice when I'm with doctors because certain tones are a little bit less assertive, but not too flimsy. And there's an art. There is an art to it,
Wow.
but it's your life and it's your body and it's your health. And whatever way you feel you're going to get that attention, do it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, you can follow wherever you get your podcasts or share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Until next time, be bold, be kind, and don't apologize for holding both. I'm Camille, and this was Kind of Bold.